Great. Good evening, folks. It's going to be difficult to talk about all the things about invasives, but I know that when I've been involved in habitat work for quite a long time, and I practice what I preach. Me and my family are managing 40-acre property in Sprague, Connecticut, way on the other side of the state since 2004. So that's our own property. We created a 5-acre meadow. We managed 12 acres of barberry in the understory. We planted thousands of different wildflowers, native grasses, trees. That's privately. Statewide, 13 years I did urban wildlife. So I did habitat management on small acreages for 13 years, urban wildlife. Then from 2003 till now, it's been state lands management, which is larger scale. And then statewide, I consult with a meadow creation, USDA. Whenever they create big fields, we plant them for their projects. So I'm going to do my talking through the slides, but I'm going to share with you what I know about habitat management and what I know about invasives management. It's very difficult to tailor exactly to the property that Kelsey mentioned because every property is different. And invasives management is really an evolving topic. And I'm going to share with you what I know as being effective. And there's 3 methods to manage invasives. One is mechanical removal, chemical use, spraying with herbicides. There's biological control where they release beetles like for purple loosestrife and mile-a-minute vine. And then the biggest one is prevention. Sheet number 4 on this handout is 97 invasives. So if you don't buy or plant those, well, of course, they're not going to be on the landscape. But my handouts are to help you, it's a tool on seasonal plant availability. And then I wrote this article in Connecticut Wildlife on a meadow that I'm in charge of. I planted it from scratch with of course my colleagues and workers, a 14-acre meadow in Robin Swamp. And so I wrote up that article here, and you guys, I brought you, I did a color copy, okay? And usually we don't do color copies, but I did for tonight because there's nothing more beautiful than color copy in meadows. Now, people can debate climate change. Like I've been in rooms where there's hot debates, right? All I know is this topic is neutral climate change. It helps the environment. Anytime you take a cornfield and make a meadow, the deep roots will carbon store. Anytime you knock out invasives and plant natives, you get biological diversity. And I've been at this for long enough that I really will try to give you what I think will help. Now, again, I have only 4 invasives that I'm going to talk about, and then we'll have question and answer. Maybe we'll get into the stuff that that I didn't, 4 is not 97. I can't do 97. We'll be here all year. So I'm just going to cover the 4, but through my slides, I'm going to add in native plants as well, especially relating to meadows, to try to help steer your mind towards a biologically diverse meadow, why it's valuable. Okay, so I don't know why why it's not. Oh, there we go. So 2 things are going to destroy the biological diversity. What is that? All the plants, flora, and fauna that are in Connecticut. What's going to cause it to decline or be a detriment to it? It's either going to be habitat loss or fragmentation. That's obvious. But what people really only been on the radar for the last maybe 20 years, 25 years is invasives. Invasives are the second greatest threat. Invasives are plants that are like a tumor on the landscape. They establish, some stay there, and they don't move much, and some start spreading around. So the 97 plants that are identified for Connecticut are invasive, and they move around after planting. Those are the ones that we're concerned about. They are the second greatest threat for biological diversity. So if you plant a meadow and mugwort takes over, or tree of heaven takes over, or garlic mustard takes over, those are tumors, and they're usurping the energy from that place and not allowing the biological diversity to thrive. So what is going to be the future of our landscape? It's going to be the decisions that we make. There's 3 million acres, there's 3 million people. The land, 70% is privately owned, and then the rest, some is state, some is municipal, but the majority is privately owned. So the future is in the hands of the people's decisions and what they care about. I love Connecticut's landscape. I'm born and raised in Connecticut. I was lucky to be able to work my whole career here in Connecticut. So I know all about our state. I remember walking the woods and rough grouse would flush all over the place. Now you're lucky to find the rough grouse. Why? The forests are older and we're getting older. It's a fact of life. The only advantage of getting older is you can kind of compare things and say, well, this is what it was like. This is what it's like today. I'm lucky that I was able to see the transitions through Connecticut and be able to still work in our state. But the beauty of our landscape, the reflection of the fall, the colors that you see is a reflection of the native flora. Most of our native flora create this beautiful landscape. Even though people go and buy burning bush, that's not what makes Connecticut's beautiful landscape. It's the native vegetation. And there's no such thing as a bad floral year. There's no such thing. Once you get out and you learn your native plants, there's never a bad year. There might be a year where it's shorter, there's less color for a long period of time, but there's always beautiful color. And now, if you're going to bake a cake and you're a baker, you need to know what ingredients go into this cake. Or if you're going to make a beautiful dinner for somebody, you got to know the ingredients. Well, same thing with habitat. Habitat, there's ingredients. What are those ingredients? Well, nature has provided those ingredients. We are humans, we have identified the non-native plants, the native plants, the invasive plants. So what can we choose from if we're going to create a beautiful landscape? So in your case, you have a meadow. What would you do to make a beautiful meadow? And there's ingredients that you could look up, and I've provided some of them in the handouts, but we're also going to talk about them. I rounded these numbers down so that you have an idea in your mind. There are about 2,800 different plants in Connecticut that are identified from historical notes, from pollen data, from our herbariums, our botanists. 1,800 rounded down were here before we got here, okay? Before European settlement, Plymouth Rock, Columbus, whatever, however people got here. Then we started bringing them in our pockets, in our knapsacks from overseas, lemon trees, herbs, you name it, was brought over legally or illegally. Nursery industry just keeps bringing more and more, legally or illegally, whatever, however you want to put that one. But 1,800, these 1,800s rounded down are the probiotics of the environment. Okay, so everybody talks about, I gotta take a probiotic because I want to digest. Well, the human body needs probiotics, right? The earth, Connecticut, 1,800 probiotic plants. That's what I call them. I don't, nobody ever really says that, but that's my comparison. Those plants were here. They co-evolved with the wildlife. They're interconnected. They have a relationship with wildlife, from the bumblebees to the animals, the birds, to insects, other insects, caterpillars. So these 1,800 are what we want to restore. Then there's 1,000, which make up to 2,800, right? That people brought over, okay? 1,000. So there's still more natives than non-natives, and then we identified 97 in Connecticut of those 1,000 that are bad. Now, if you plant a mugo pine in your yard, it's gonna stay there. It's not gonna go infect your neighbor's yard and spread all over the place. Mugo pine's gonna sit right there. If you plant an autumn olive, 60 pounds of fruit, yeah, you're going to see it all in your neighborhood. Put that in a field or something. So, or mugwort. So the 97 invasives are the bad boys, well, I shouldn't say boys, just the bad actors, okay? The bad actors. This book here from the Connecticut Botanical Society, I have a copy in here if you want to see it. It's a coffee stained one. If you want that's where that's a checklist. And it's bulletin number 5. From the Connecticut Botanical Society. It's a real good handy book to have if you want to check the native and the non-native plants of Connecticut. And then the invasives list. Never buy anything without bringing the invasives list with you. When you go to a nursery, always have that along. Now, I'm going to share some examples from Sessions Woods that will sort of, bring us to how I wrote a 10-year management plan for 764 acres. We have to plan out how we're going to manage all of this vegetation on 764 acres. Some of them are fields, some mostly forest. But statewide, I manage fields and edges. All of our fields and edges, there's over 700 some acres state, in the western side of the state. But this property is one that I manage. And I just want to mention that, and I don't want to, I'm not going to spend time on this, but we use scientifically guided methods. What does that mean? We don't just go out and do things. We try to guide them scientifically. How are we going to manage an invasive? We want to do it carefully. We want to figure out all the different methods to remove it and reduce its influence. And then what are we going to replace it with? So that's scientifically guided. What kind of plant community is there? Is it a meadow community, wet, dry, intermediate? What kind of soil is there? Is it sunny? Is it sun or shade? What kind of plant community? Is it early young forest? Is it later stage? All these things are considered. So we have to scientifically guide what we do. And then at Sessions, we educate the public. So if you come there, you'll see signage and you'll see exhibits. And then even our other properties, we want to do that. And then we want to provide, bird watching and walking and stuff like that. Now, all of these little red dots, that's an aerial photo of Sessions Woods. There's 13 invasive plants. And I had to write, what we did for each plant. When I wrote the 10-year plan, some we had already managed. So I wrote how we manage them, and then how would we manage the rest of them. If you come to Sessions Woods, you'll see that we've minimized very, very low-level numbers of invasives. And I'm going to share with you, like I said, 4 examples of invasives, hopefully relating to what you can relate to with your land. But before I do that, some people say, is there really a difference between an invaded area and a non-invaded area? A cleaner native habitat versus a invaded area. So Delaware, University of Delaware, Doug Tallamy, who wrote a really neat book, Bringing Nature Home, and he's an entomologist, researcher. He and his students looked at invaded properties and then non-invaded properties, and he compared the caterpillars, biomass and types. And I just want to share this one study with you, 4 invaded, 4 native. And he found that 16 times fewer caterpillars were in the invaded sites. There were 13 times fewer 6 times fewer species, 13 and a half fewer caterpillars, and almost 24 times less biomass than the native sites. Now, why is that important? One brood of to carry forth a brood of chickadees or birds, you need thousands of caterpillars. Caterpillars are the engine that runs the bird world, and then that's just the birds. It doesn't include other things like the bats and other animals. So it's very important in that just that the native area. So anytime you take upon a property and you start removing the invasives and make it more native, you are improving it biologically. And this is just one study that shows that. And then this, I'm not going to show too many graphs, but this one is really important because when you have an opportunity to manage invasives, this is abundance and here's time. Very simple graph. If the invasives are at low numbers and you manage them here, you take action, you prevent it from like the J-shaped curve of exponential growth. Most people notice invasives when they're up here, when they're too many and they're like overwhelmed. If there's 2 patches of mugwort, you could attack them. If there's 20 patches of mugwort, get your army ready, right? So there's wisdom in getting things earlier, identifying them and knocking them out before they become overly invasive. So it's good to have scouts out there that know they're invasives and just walk around, and when they find an invasive, they knock it out before it becomes a big mess, right? So there's a lot of wisdom in taking action early. Of course, when you're managing lots of properties, very hard to do that, but to get action early, because you might miss stuff, but there's wisdom in doing that. So in your meadow, if you have a few of things, take action right away. Don't wait 2-3 years. It gets worse. So you may not have winged euonymus on your land, but I'm using this example to prove one thing. There's 764 acres on Sessions Woods. And where do we find all of our our invasive winged euonymuses? They're all along this East Chippens Hill Road here, primarily here. Guess what? They're over here. The birds they roost over here, and guess where the birds are dropping the droppings? You go interior over here, you don't find many winged euonymuses. Find them all along this edge. So there's a, defecation rate. They have their dinner and then they go to the to the restroom, and wherever they drop the droppings, of course, stuff happens. It grows. So this example, I'm using it just to show that proximity to your fields of where these invasives are. So if you remove, that's why people will say, well, if I don't remove on my land, they don't remove theirs, why do I need to remove? You still have to manage your property, because if you let yours mature, that's just going to add in more to the next property. So it's like a domino effect, right? So manage what you can manage. Forget about those guys. You want to get people on board, show them that you're doing it on your land. Maybe you can get them on board to do it on their land, but manage your land, our land first, right? Whatever you manage. So this plant is what I call instant gratification. Instant results. People want to, but look at how it takes over the understory. The berries are prolific. You'll find these coming into your fields, especially if your field is not mowed at least once a year or 50% every 2 years minimum. You'll get woody plants. And winged euonymus I find coming into fields, if they haven't been mowed after 3 or 4 years, 5 years, then you see an invasion of winged euonymus. But if you manage, once you get the woodies out of there, you can keep them under control by just mowing at least once a year. And we'll talk about that. And then, of course, we use stump treatment when there's bigger plants. And that's, I know that's, Kelsey already told me that there's a movement more for non-chemical use, but I'm going to share with you all the things that I've used, and I'll also share non-chemical means. But this is triclopyr that we use on cut stumps for winged euonymus. And then the other reason I used winged euonymus as my first example is this instant gratification of red. There's native plants that have red. Just pay attention to it. Like this is highbush blueberry. And I always get a kick out of when I walk the fields in the fall, in the woods and the swamps, and I have folks with me and I'll point to a plant, and from far away, it kind of looks like a burning bush, but then you go up to it and it's like, wow, that's a highbush blueberry. But we don't associate landscaping with highbush blueberry. We associate blueberries with our muffins and our pies and for the garden, but we don't think of it as a really beneficial ecological plant. There's a bombus or bee that specifically feeds on the blossom of the vacciniums. So I plant them a lot. That's in front of the flag in front of my house. This one was on a roadside in the eastern side of and from far away as we drove by, it looked like a burning bush, but there was a beautiful old native highbush blueberry that's gorgeous. And nature is amazing if you start truly paying attention. Beautiful plant right there. Okay, the plant that I want to start out with talking about managing is bittersweet. And I've seen bittersweet take over fields. Right now, Simsbury has about a 15-acre field that's literally, I would say 35% bittersweet. Like you wouldn't know because it's not going up any trees, but it's all intertwined all over. And you just see islands and islands of it. Just, they don't, it's going to be a really big challenge. So that loves fields just as it loves the woods. But it's a plant that if you choose to manage it, you can get rid of it. And I'll share with this one example. Remember I said I practice what I preach. So this is our land in the east, and where number 3 is there. I'm going to share with you how we manage the invasives. And I do this on state land too, but I'm using my own example because I have the slides for it. And I want to show you an example from my personal. So anytime you can cut bittersweet starting now, I mean, not now, but during the growing season. So, once April rolls around, things start growing through October, you can lop them. Now there is optimal times, and we could get into specifics maybe later, but there are optimal times. I found out that there's no such thing as an optimal time when you have a lot of property, you don't have a lot of people helping you. Optimal is now, like, let's do something, right? There are optimal times for benefiting the maximum, the maximum die off of that plant, but there's also reality that you got to manage when you've got time. But this plant, if you cut it, you stop it from producing berries. It loves to produce a lot of berries, so you cut it. If you choose not to chemically treat the stump, then you will get hundreds of runners. It's reality. When I first started in this field, we cut all the time. Winter, where you could do basal bark treatment, and then, the next summer I learned, well, there's a lot more. But I did stop a 35, 40-year-old vine with, hundreds of thousands of berries from producing. So there is benefit to doing it. And I prevented the tree from falling over because of the weight of the vines. So there's wisdom in cutting this. Once you identify all of your bittersweet vines and you cut them, whether you choose to cut them without treating them, or if you choose to treat them with the triclopyr, which I choose to treat them, so I prevent stump sprouting. You can prevent all the distortions in your forest. You can, sometimes you need a chainsaw, they're so big, but normally a bow saw or a lopper is big enough. And I do spread the triclopyr on it. You only need to put it along this, you only need to put it on the bark layer here if you really, but I put it on the whole surface so that you get maximum absorption so that you prevent sprouting. Like, see what happens if this is one that was not treated. You see all the sprouts coming off the vine there. Now here's our handiwork shown here. Some trees have, 30, 40% vines. Some had almost 100%. But after you get done treating these vines, you look back, you go back a week, 2 weeks later, and then you start seeing, hey, these trees now are going to be able to, they'll shed these vines gradually, and they'll start being able to photosynthesize, and you'll save the trees from dying off. There's two things that happen if you don't manage bittersweet. The ice and the wind will blow trees over, or they'll outright starve the tree from photosynthesizing. And like what you saw here in the middle, this tree is pretty, it's got a little bit of green on top, but it may not make it. So there's wisdom in doing vine management. So if you want to manage bittersweet, for me, every hour that you spend on bittersweet is well returns. You get good returns on it, and you'll get you'll remove the canopy. This canopy. It's not only a ground invasive, but it literally takes every layer of the forest. It does damage to every layer of the forest. It's Oriental bittersweet. And then Tree of Heaven, the next example I'm going to give you. Tree of Heaven, this is not far from here. This is Route 7, Kent. There's the Housatonic River. We have 2 miles of frontage on the Housatonic River WMA. When we first acquired the property, Tree of Heaven was prominent on the property. I'll show you photos. And I really didn't know what to do. USDA at that time had a grant that you would give to the state. They did fund we used, the first thing we did, I'll show you here. We counted how many we had, 150, some were, 23 of them were 8 inches or bigger. They were female clone. By the way, just as an aside, they were introduced in 1784 in the United States, in Philadelphia, just so you know where that came from, where the Tree of Heaven. And displaces by sprouting, clonal growth, they'll shoot runners out. But they have a chemical, a phytotoxic compound that was the Journal of Chemical Ecology published a report that the roots and the leaves will actually suppress other plants. So it has not only physically usurping the sun and the energy, but shooting out a chemical that suppresses other things. And of course, now we know it's the larval host for the spotted lanternfly, which is another reason we want to manage it. But the seeds that were being produced from the female clone were 350,000 per mature tree. So that plant, if you let it mature, you're going to be spouting out a lot of seeds. In this case, some of them were going into the Houstonic River. They were spreading all around. So there's female and male clones. There's female clones and male clones. The female clones are, if you have female clones on your property, you want to get them first with the seeds. And then the male clones, they still vegetatively reproduce, but they're not going to be as damaging because they're not producing the seeds. They get really tall. They shoot runners out. So if you cut a stump, as soon as you cut the stump, they'll shoot runners out. And that's the challenge about mechanical removal, is that if you cut the stump and don't treat the stump, they shoot runners out, and they will, then, if those runners, if you mechanically remove those, they still reproduce in the root fragments. I'll share with you how we've been managing them. I know that you guys want biological control. You could do mechanical, but I've never seen it work 100% with Tree of Heaven. But we do a foliar application. So the first thing we did, this is all drum chop mode. This is all the stuff that was less than 8 inches in diameter. We contracted a Brontosaurus, this large equipment that has a drum chop, and we drum chopped all the small stuff. It was just such a big patch. And then we treated the resprouts. The trees themselves, the big trees, we girdled. So we double chainsaw the big ones. The bark is not very deep. It's about, we only went in about maybe 3/8 of an inch. And then double chainsaw, we try to prevent it from jumping this cut. So we do 2 of them. We've also used a woodsman pal or a machete. We're kind of experimenting a little bit. We use both techniques, see which ones work better, but the double chainsawing works really good. The woodsman pal just gives you more surface area so that it doesn't jump the graph or jump that spot. Here are the standing dead trees there. If you go to this property today, I have a outstanding free ice cream for anybody that works for me now, not you guys. I mean, I could maybe extend it to you guys as long as you go to the spot, not somewhere else, and bring back a tree of heaven. But on Houstonic River WMA, it's been since 2008 that we started the project, and we've eliminated tree of heaven from the property. And it's really rewarding. I believe that this is a plant you can exterminate for a long time if you choose to do it, if you have enough energy and time to do it. But these are no longer standing there. Today we would drop them and not leave them standing, because now the lawyers have gotten onto this, where you don't want to leave a standing tree somewhere if you purposely killed it. So I would drop it. But I'm going to share with you that if you girdle, the wisdom with girdling is that the tree dies very slow, and it doesn't send the message to the roots to resprout. So there's wisdom in letting the tree die slowly, so it doesn't shoot as many runners out. But that's with girdling and chemical control, because the chemical is going in there as well. But even if you just girdled and you allowed it to slowly die. Now if we leveled all those, the runners would automatically start taking off. If you lop them 100%, immediately after you do that, it sends messages hormonally to the roots. You have hundreds of sprouts. Whereas if you girdle, it slows that down, and the tree dies over, a period of 2 summers, maybe. Did you use chemicals on it as well? I'm going to get to that. Yeah, that's okay. It's a good question. I'm going to share with you how we did it. So forgive me if I'm telling you about chemical use, but that's how we did it. I don't know of any other method for these. We will mention some mechanical removal on another species. We use this triclopyr Garland 3A. And we follow the label. You have to follow the label. This is over the counter, so we don't need an applicator's license to buy this unless you are getting paid to do it as a business. You have to get applicator's license for any kind of chemical. But if you're applying it on your own land, you don't need it for this chemical triclopyr. So chainsaw, machete, and then we use this squirter bottle to infuse the Garland or the triclopyr in the wound that we made, the wound, whether it was machete or chainsaw.
Is that a one-time application or more?
One time, yeah. If the tree jumps its graft, or not its graft, if it jumps its wound, you may have to re-wound, but we'd have to retreat what we already treated. But if you have to recut, because then you would put a new. But most of them were not. Now these runners, the runners that took off, we used a backpack sprayer with 2%. Okay, 2% foliar. The cut stumps we did out of the bottle. So by the label, you use what's out 100%, which is it's actually 47% is the Garland 3A. Some people will cut that in half, depends on what you use. But for Tree of Heaven, we used in that bottle was 100% from the bottle without dilution.
For the smaller ones, are you better off using that griddle process?
So as I mentioned, 8 inches and above, 8 inches and below, we chopped it up. We chopped them down with the jump chop mower. Then 8 inches and over, we girdled. The smaller stuff's a little harder to do. We have done that. I'll share an example where we took smaller 2-inch ones and we macheted them, and you can still do the same thing. So mechanical removal is, you could try it, but the roots will resprout eventually. Any fragments that you leave in the ground. So that's the kind of bottle, the squirt bottle we use. Some people use a dabber, a buckthorn dabber. It's like kind of like a bingo dabber. You could use that. Buck blaster. It's called buck blaster. At Simsbury, the red dot in the top there was big. We used a drum chop mower, same kind of thing. We did the same thing along this plant loves sandy outwash soils. It can grow in the crack of a sidewalk. The Tree of Heaven will grow anywhere, but it loves impoverished sites or damaged sites. Like it does really well wherever we've disturbed or wherever, or where the river has, that's actually not disturbed. It's riverine, outwashes and where there's not a lot of topsoil. But anyway, I'm going to share with you, there was a battle between Tree of Heaven and staghorn sumac and we had to decide, do we let Tree of Heaven win or do we let sumac win? And that's really what it's a battle, and we chose to make sumac win. Any red-berried sumac is a good sumac. It's not poison sumac, right? And even the poison sumac is good, but for humans, but is not good. But the staghorn is beautiful. It turns red. The berries are used by wildlife, both fall, winter, and spring. Here's an example of during a blizzard, this patch of staghorn, flock of robins, was early spring storm. There's nothing to eat, so these winter persistent berries are very important. The red-berried sumacs, there's several of them in Connecticut. They're very valuable. Smooth sumac, staghorn, fragrant sumac. So it's important. It's an important species to have on the landscape. It's clonal, makes good thickets. So it's important to think about that. Now, on our land in Sprague, we had 14 male trees. They were big. We actually had a deer stand in one. And, but I didn't let it last long. We girdled it, and I challenged anybody to find the tree of heaven on that land. And that was all male clones. There was a big patch of male clones. So the other example I could give you is if you talk to Tim Mack of Hamden Land Trust, he heard my talk one day. He invited me down to Rocky Top Preserve. He had over 120 tree of heavens. I showed him how I manage them, squirting them, and then, girdling and squirt. And they're having amazing success there. And they're going to prevent that little preserve from becoming invaded. So there's wisdom in doing management. And then we're going to get to your fields, right? So fields and edges. Fields and edges are so of all the habitats you can manage, if you're a habitat manager and you say, what areas can I manage effectively? I've come to the conclusion that fields and edges are easier than once you start diving into the woods. The woods are, first of all, most properties have more forest than fields. So you're going to need an army to start attacking the woods. But fields and edges, the advantage to fields and edges, and I'm going to share this example, is once you manage them, you could mow half. So you can keep the woody plants out, because mowing prevents woody plants. So you have double management. You're removing invasives, and then you're preventing the woody invasives from coming back by mowing, at least, like I said, half every year. So this field on the right is what's in that handout I gave you, the story I wrote in Connecticut Wildlife. And I'm going to share with you some examples. So fields and edges are important to manage because of what I've just mentioned, that first of all, there's a lot of biological diversity that you could create. It's very beautiful. People look at the fall foliage, and when I look at the fall foliage, we forget about the beautiful grasses and the accenting. You drive down a highway and you see the clumps of the little blue stem, the switchgrass, the Indian grass, I'm telling you, it's a beautiful, once you start identifying it, it's very beautiful part of the landscape. And so, the angle of the sun on that little blue stem field is just amazing. And I already shared with you why it's important with that. But these fields, if we over manicure them, all we're doing is creating more goose habitat. Quart a day of droppings. So we mow them down, we let them look real nice, and then geese stay here instead of going to Canada. And our resident goose population is growing about 50% a year. The migratory one only grows 5% a year. And it's because we're creating habitat. So if you reduce how much you manicure and put in wildflowers and native grasses and reduce the food source, you're going to reduce the goose population feeding opportunities. So there's wisdom from that angle too. So I'm just going to try to bring that in as a plus to why you'd want to try to make more native meadows than manicured areas. This photo is, like, for me as a wildlife biologist, I chuckle because, somebody's trying to scare the geese away with the silhouette. You see, the geese are having a fun time with their young there, saying, yeah, okay, yeah, come get me, So the sustainable answer to goose management is, first of all, there's a hunting season. There's 3 hunting seasons, and that does reduce the population. People like to eat them, and they hunt them, regulated hunting. But the best way is sustainability. Remove their habitat, reduce their habitat. If you have a pond with 4 edges of lawn, create only 2 edges of lawn, right? And the rest will be native vegetation. The geese can't feed on that. And you can calculate how many pounds per geese that you've eliminated when you create these meadows, these beautiful meadows. So establish the wildflowers and grasses, you improve the ecotones. A lot of people don't know it, but it takes 2 million blossoms approximately to make a pound of honey. So our farm bees are out there busy collecting nectar, right, and pollen, and they need about 2 million blossoms to make 1 pound of honey. So when I learned this, I was floored. And when I make my tea, I don't let anything drop on the ground because it's a lot of work. You know, 1 teaspoon is a lot of blossoms have to be visited for these bees. So those are the worker bees. Now we're not even talking about the dozens and dozens and dozens of native bees and pollinators that need those flowers. And so, you know, that's just the worker bees. So this, I'm going to share with you this, this example. Now, if you have a field, and I don't know, like I said, Kelsey mentioned the field that you guys are managing. What was the name of it again?
Native Meadows.
Native Meadows. That could be a better name. All right, we'll never forget that. So your native meadows. So we not only create meadows, but we create what we call an ecotone. So this was an old cornfield, 13.6 acres. The ecotone is the zone between the field and the forest. A lot of times fields are mowed right up to the tall trees. You know, there's no stadium effect. There's no gradual progression of vegetation. So we planted this whole thing with a Truax planter. I'll describe how we did that. It's a native seed planter, but we've also created this ecotone where we're having this transition between the forest and the field so that we allow more thickets and more varieties of native shrubs and native early successional trees to come in. And I'll describe that. These soft edges are very important. And on page 3 of my handout, I have what they call thicket produce, or no, page 2. They're called thicket producers. So if I had a gray dogwood, you handed me a sprig of gray dogwood, you handed me one stem, thick as my pinky, I plant it right there. In 3 or 4 years, you'll have an island around it. It clones and it forms a thicket. And before you know it, there's catbirds and yellowthroats nesting in it. There's berries being produced. It becomes an island thicket. Rabbits zigzag through it. They can't get eaten by a fox. There's so much. Bird gets chased by a hawk. It flies into the thickets. So thickets, I gave you a list of the species that I know of that form great thickets. So a thicket is now these plants along the edges, there's gray dogwoods, there's silky dogwoods, there's viburnums that produce these thickets. When you plant them, they compound interest, I call it, compounding interest. They return more investment for you because they're cloning. And then if you get really good at habitat management, you could take a shovel and share those to other fields. You could remove, disassociate some of the runners and take them and put them in your other fields. I do that all the time on our fields. I take and I move plants from a field to another field, borrowing them from the original clone. And you can save a lot of money, and it's a great technique. But these thickets are very valuable, these soft edges. So it's kind of like a stadium effect. So those areas, if you choose to make an ecotone, you can't just use a bush hog. The vegetation might get to 2 inches or 3 inches. You have to use what they call a fecon mower to mow it. So you have to put it in the right areas. But there's wisdom in creating ecotones. See gray dogwood there, silky dogwood. So there's a variety of animals that use, but this gradual progression is, if there's a abrupt edge, not good for wildlife. There's abrupt edge, lawn to top trees. You want a gradual progression. So invasives management. So the red dots are the bad actors. We manage this property. So after we established this field it was basically a cornfield. So we didn't have to do much other than we disked it lightly, and then we used a Truax planter, no-till seeder. And it's a machine. I'll show you. I think I have a picture of it. And the Northwest Sportsmen's Association paid for the seed because they're interested in woodcock habitat and turkey brooding habitat. So they actually paid for the seed, and we planted the fields. And you'll read about it in that publication. But we had autumn olive there, we had bittersweet, we had bush honeysuckle, multiflora rose along the edges, and mugwort. Even though it was a a cornfield. It had mugwort in it, little patches here and there, because it was glyphosate. Apparently didn't do much with it with whatever the farmer was using at the time. And garlic mustard are the major invasives there. And of course, reed canary grass, which is another invasive that we have to manage there. I use an acronym called REAP, Removal and Management of Invasives, Early Detection, Enhancement by Planting Natives, and Prevention. Like, so I don't know, I came up with it. I don't know if it's any good. Probably never going to see that acronym again, but I try to think of something to remember. So remove or manage the invasives, early detect the invasives, enhance after you removed. And just by removing them, you're enhancing. So you don't have to necessarily plant, but remove. Some fields, all we do is remove the invasives, and the field does fine on its own without planting anything. Just remove the invasives. And then prevention means don't plant things. Don't plant invasives. So my next example is autumn olive, because you can be successful with mechanical removal. Autumn olive is a shade-hating shrub, hates shade, loves sun. In the sun, it'll produce 60 pounds of fruit. You know, perfect, beautiful. It can has mycorrhiza, has a symbiotic relationship with the soil. By the end of the summer, where did all these autumn olives come from? They shoot up by July. You think they're on steroids. And you didn't see them earlier in the spring, but they just take off. They're good at producing their own nitrogen, and they can take off. But I've been successful with a tractor and a chain. I'm going to show you examples. ATV with a chain, removing them. Now there's a silky dogwood trying to live. And a field can literally be closed in with autumn olives all along the edges. It'll close canopy on it, and everything will be suppressed underneath. One of the states in Illinois uses them for chips. They chip them, and they use the autumn olive chips for trails because it suppresses other things. But I've never used it for that purpose, but they're very bad. The silky dogwood is a valuable shrub, but here you can see it's suppressed and barely alive because the autumn olive is really usurping all the energy out of it. So mechanical removal is really beneficial. You see, I like to use this little tractor, a 28-horse tractor it's got an 8-inch little backhoe on it, little small backhoe. You can knock out a lot of stuff with it. And of course, we try to, you creep along the fields, and you could pop out the stumps, shake them out, push the soil back, and pack it down. Sometimes I'll put wood chips on the area that we removed so that we don't, for a temporary barrier, clean wood chips so that other seeds can't take hold if you're not ready to plant it yet. That's one way. And then you could scrape away the wood chips and plant. But there's wisdom in mechanical removal. At Sessions Woods, we removed a patch of autumn olive that were planted in the late 80s by my former biologist, who at that time was under the same Kool-Aid drinking that, plant something that grows lots of berry producing, berries. It's not about ecology. It was about just get a lot of, just like burning bush, get color. So biologists did the same thing back in the 60s and 70s. Plant something with a lot of berries, feeds the bluebirds, but it was wrong thinking. We have to admit that. So we used the tractor, we pulled them all out, and then we planted all native viburnums and dogwoods. It was a great conversation when I had with him at the time, because I showed him a publication that showed that they were invasive. And he goes, well, we'll remove them only if you come up with alternatives. I said, yeah. So at the time we had a state nursery, we got bare root seedlings, and we popped out the autumn olives and we put in the natives. And since then, I have not seen many autumn olives on Sessions Woods, luckily. But for about 10 years, I was removing them from the berries that had been deposited. But once we got past that, I don't see many anymore. I haven't seen them in years. And I document everything we remove from Sessions, and that's not one there. So you could have a lot of fun with the ATV. Like, people get mad at ATVs, but if you get an ATV with a chain, You rip out your vegetation. It could be a lot of fun for kids. I did that with my two sons and we had a blast. We dug up a lot of autumn olives and other things, bush honeysuckle, using a chain and a 4-wheel drive. You could use it like a tractor. That's what we use it like. So you can, these are what we removed from this 5-acre field edge. 32 4 to 7 foot high ones, 67 saplings. We did spray foliar some though. And we did treat some cut and paint. So we didn't do all mechanical. We did do some treatments. But mechanical can work too. 21 that were really big. So cut, treat, make a brush pile out of the cut brush. And little by little, you reclaim your fields and you can get your biological diversity back using a combination of mechanical and foliar herbicide or stump treatment. Of course, you're going to see that. It's in reality. And then this is another rig that we use on our fields. So it's a sprayer that we use mounted on a ATV, and we'll spot treat invasives, in fields that are, once the field is greater than 5 acres, we've got properties that have, 70-acre fields, 60-acre fields. You just can't physically do that all mechanical. So we use equipment like this. And then I mentioned too that we use the seeder. If you have a field that already has native vegetation, all you have to do is remove the invasives and then supplement. In the case of a cornfield, we start from scratch. So this Truax planter has 3 bins. It has a wildflower seed bin in the front, has fluffy seeds. This is a little blue stem, big blue stem. If you throw them up in the air, they blow away. They're fluffy. That's for the middle one. It has an agitator that pushes them down into there's 8 discs and 8 funnels that funnel the water, the seeds down. And it's a no-till seeder. Then the back bins are for the nursery crop, which is either oats or rye. And so what we do is while we're pulling this, we calibrate the throw or how much is going to be dropped. And then we the cover crop will grow first, usually within a week. 7 to 10 days, you start seeing the nursery crop. And then the wildflowers and the grasses, we call it crawl, walk, and run. So 3 years usually, you'll start seeing the native vegetation take over. And we've had some pretty good success. In the case of, if you have a meadow that you have to start from scratch, this piece of equipment is really good for that. So we've tried to replace non-native grasses with our native grasses. And these are some of the ones that are called bunch grasses. So this little blue stem, when you plant it, it's not like your lawn that is rhizomatous. This will stay here. Another one might grow over here, another seed, and in between, wildflowers can grow. All these nooks and crannies allow other wildflowers to grow in between. That's the wisdom of these native grasses. They're bunch grasses. They're not clonal. Switchgrass is a little bit clonal, so you got to be careful with that one. This one here on the bottom left. But the other ones are clump, like Indian grasses. And once you start observing these plants, there's really it's amazing the wildlife that you start seeing. Like these turkeys are stripping the seeds off of the little blue stem grass. And at first I didn't know what they were doing, but then it became clear that they're stripping the little fluffy seeds. And you'd be amazed at how wildlife utilizes these places. They might be scratching around in between these clumps. They might be nesting. They might be doing all kinds of stuff. This deer tongue grass right here, one winter, I walked into a field and a bunch of birds flew out. So I stayed for a while, just made myself incognito, and I videotaped this junco. Now watch, it's gonna climb up the deer tongue grass and it's gonna take the little millet seed out of the leaves. Deer tongue hides its seeds in the leaves, and the birds know exactly where to find it. And I'll see birds feeding on this starting in September, and I'll see them right through almost May. These seeds are persistent, and before green up, this is what they're eating. And this is just a couple of the native grasses that you're seeing here. So there's wisdom in planting these kinds of native grasses, and sometimes you don't realize how valuable they are till you start really observing and seeing how they get utilized by wildlife. People will ask me, how big is a field have to be valuable? If you plant a native meadow as big as this room, or half the size of this room, it is valuable than if you mowed it down and had grass. The question is, what would be nesting there, right? So in this case, indigo bunting's like a 5-acre meadow, approximately. So if you make a 5-acre meadow, but the ones that you're going to get, no matter how big your meadows are, is the American goldfinch. One of the species that I've enjoyed over the years watching in my fields. And this is evening primrose. Oops. This is a plant that right here. Oops. You see this packet? How much time? We're almost going over, huh? Okay. I'm pretty much done. I think after this couple more slides, we're gonna be finished. This see this packet right here? This is full of seeds. And evening primrose will grow up to about 4 or 5 feet. If you cut it down, it'll stay shorter. But people will put food in a seed box, but they don't really ask themselves, what do they feed in the wild? And one of the things that I've noticed is when you make these, whoops, that one I don't have the video for that. I'm sorry, but they'll feed on these seeds throughout the summer, throughout the fall, winter, and early spring. But the point I'm trying to make here is that you want to create as biologically diverse a field as you can with a variety of species. Okay.
If you feed the birds, do you have to worry about the seed that the birds are eating?
So not the ones thistle you do thistle. So they used to sterilize thistle. And they don't do it anymore. So I was seeing a lot of Canada thistle out there. So most of the seeds won't, but watch out for the thistle. The mowing part, if I could, the mowing part, we mow 50% of our fields if we can every year. This year was really wet, so we got only like 50. We only did about half of our fields so far this year, which I'm worried about. We have a marsh master. I'm just gonna get it to do the wet areas, but mow half of your field every year. Pick one side, then do the other side. There's wisdom in doing that. So you want to mow 50% every year so that you can keep it in herbaceous cover. That there's wisdom in doing that. Now I know I because we're short of time, I'm not going to get too much into specifics about this, but if you say you label this field, this A and this B, or you could say, odd years you do this field, even years you do this field. So, odd and even. So call this field 1, field 2. So odd and even years, however you want to do it. If you talk to the Xerxes Society, the butterfly and insect folks, they're going to want you to do a third, a third, and a third. I've never been able to coordinate a third, a third, a third. Just, instructing staff or anybody to go mow half of the field, that's okay. You're going to do it because you could tell where you mowed last year. Actually, the vegetation is different. But if you tell people a third, third, and third, it's a nightmare because if you skip a year, you're done. Forget it. It's all over. So, but if you could accomplish mowing half your field every year, this field was mowed. This was mowed. That was mowed last year. This year we're going to mow this side. We're flipping. We flip the sides. Each year.
Like late season.
Yeah. So I was gonna cover that, but I don't know if we have time. So we don't mow any field until after July 15th. Now, if it's hayed, if we mow it, we don't mow it till after December. You know, if it's a field that we mow, it's not farmer oriented. If a farmer's haying it, July 15th is the earliest we let them take a hay crop. On our managed fields, we do this in December through March 31st. That's our window of mowing half. And the wisdom behind that is when the birds come back, they have a nesting area in the spring. And then the place that you mowed will not grow any woody plants. And you won't be running over any nests.
That native meadows that left mowing a little, right? But that's for the next.
So so I know mugwort's a big topic, and I told Kelsey that I don't have, I've been managing a lot of mugwort for the last 5 years, but I don't have a magical answer. So I'm holding off on giving you advice on it because I literally, matter of fact, let's shut down. Let's bring that up. I guess that's going to be our hot. Why don't we can we do question and answer now? We'll leave this up, I guess,